Ever feel like, I don't know, everyone around you is suddenly fluent in AI? One minute you're figuring out how to use the latest emoji, and the next everyone's casually debating, like, the ethics of large language models.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, good news is you are in the right place. Today, we are diving deep into your notes on LLMs. And trust me, by the time we're done, you'll be able to, like, confidently discuss this stuff. No more nodding along, pretending to understand. We're going for clarity, not confusion.
Absolutely. We can demystify all of this.
Okay, so first things first, what exactly are large language models?
Yeah, so LLMs, they're basically the master communicators of the AI world. But let's back up a sec. Think about generative AI.
Like AI that creates things.
Exactly, yeah. AI-generated art, music, all that jazz.
Yeah.
LLMs are a specific type of generative AI.
Oh.
But instead of images or music, they focus on understanding and generating human-like text.
Ah, so it's all about words.
Exactly.
Gotcha. And here's what I find really intriguing. You don't need to be a coding wizard to actually use these things.
Right. It's all
It's like natural language processing, right? You're
Yeah.
basically having a conversation with them.
Yeah, you got it. We call those instructions, those conversation starters, prompts, and those guide the LLM's responses. It's like you give it a nudge and it takes off.
Kind of like giving it a creative writing prompt almost.
Yeah, in a way. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Imagine this AI has a short-term memory limit. That's what we call the context window in LLMs. It's the amount of information they can hold on to at once, kind of like their working memory, and they use that to understand your requests.
Okay, so it's like they've skimmed a few chapters but haven't read the whole book, right?
Perfect analogy. And that, honestly, was a huge EG bottleneck with earlier text generation models.
Holy.
Remember those old school chatbots?
Oh, yeah.
Felt super robotic and repetitive.
Painfully so.
Exactly. They just couldn't hold a meaningful conversation or generate really interesting creative text because their context window was so limited.
That's like they forgot what they were saying halfway through.
Totally. But then came a game changer. Transformers.
Okay, so transformers. I keep seeing that term pop up in our notes. What's the big deal?
Okay, picture this. Instead of reading a sentence word by word, you could instantly understand how each word relates to every other word, the whole picture.
Like some sort of super speed reading.
Exactly. That's the power of attention in Transformers.
Right.
It allows these models to process information in parallel. And that, my friend, is what allows LLMs to handle massive amounts of data and generate much more complex, nuanced, and, well, frankly, interesting text.
So that's how we get AI tools that can write poems and translate languages, even code.
Exactly. Because they are no longer limited to those tiny bits of information.
So it's like they upgraded from a tiny notepad to a massive whiteboard.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about what LLMs are, this breakthrough in their architecture. But now the question is, how do we actually talk to these superpowered language wizards? How do we get them to do our bidding?
Well, that's the art of prompt engineering, and it's becoming a whole field in itself. Think of it like this. You're trying to give instructions to someone who's a bit, well, forgetful.
Okay, I know a few people like that.
Right, so you got to be clear, very specific, and maybe even get a little creative to get the results you want.
So it's less like, here's a question, give me the answer, and more like, I don't know, let me guide you towards the answer I'm looking for.
Yes. It's about setting the stage, providing context.
Now, our notes also mention these different levels of what's called in-context learning. Zero shot, one shot, few shot. What's that all about?
Okay, good question. Imagine you're asking for, say, movie recommendations, right? With zero-shot learning, you just ask straight up, suggest a good movie for me.
Pretty vague.
Very. With one-shot learning, you give a single example. I enjoyed The Martian, anything similar. You've given it a little more to work with. Then you have few-shot learning, where you give several examples. I loved The Martian and Interstellar. Got anything else like that? The more context, the better it understands your preferences.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. So even though LLMs are incredibly powerful, they still need us to, guide them a bit, right? They're not quite at the point where they can read our minds.
Not yet, at least.
And that brings up a really interesting thought. As these models get even better at understanding context from fewer examples, what does that mean for how we communicate, how we learn, how we even create?
It's a great question. Will we get to a point where a single sentence, a single example, can convey incredibly complex ideas?
And will learning then become more about just curating the perfect prompts rather than memorizing tons of information?
Who knows, but it's certainly something to ponder.
It really is mind-blowing. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. Now that you understand the basics of LLMs, what possibilities come to mind? How could you utilize these tools in your own life? Something to think about.
The future is waiting to be prompted.
Ah, I like that. All right, until next time, everyone, happy prompting.